Night falls over the high plains of eastern Colorado. In the flickering light of campfires you hear the distant crack of rifles and the screams of women and children. A lone officer stands stiffly, silhouetted against the burning lodges, his own men arrayed behind him. He does not raise his rifle. This is not a battle but a massacre, and Captain Silas Soule refuses to take part. Around him, the Colorado 3rd Cavalry under Colonel John Chivington descends on a peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho village waving white flags. While hundreds die, Soule has to decide whether he will obey or resist, a decision that will cost him everything.
Put your hands up for stories untold, echoes of glory and hearts so bold. We dig deeper where the truth will glow, forgotten history, let the rhythm flow.
To understand this moment we must return to July 26, 1838. In the small town of Bath, Maine, a boy is born into a family of fervent abolitionists. Silas Soule grows up hearing his father read anti-slavery tracts by the light of candles. Their farmhouse doubles as a stop on the Underground Railroad. Neighboring towns talk about the Soule's daring activism, and young Silas absorbs the idea that morality sometimes means defiance. When he is 16, the family moves to the Kansas Territory, joining other Free Staters in the fight against pro-slavery forces. Bleeding Kansas becomes a battleground between slavery and freedom. Silas and his siblings act as conductors on the Underground Railroad, guiding enslaved people to safety. He memorizes secret routes through thick woods, moving under cover of night with lantern in hand. At one point he escorts a group of fugitives from Missouri all the way to Lawrence. The risks are enormous. Capture could mean death, but the Soule family's commitment to abolition pushes them forward. By 1860 Silas is known among the Jayhawkers, anti-slavery guerrillas who raid pro-slavery towns. When the abolitionist icon John Brown is arrested after his raid on Harper's Ferry, Soule is selected for a daring rescue. Disguised as a drunk, he sneaks into the Charleston, Virginia, jail to break out Brown's men. Brown himself refuses rescue, believing martyrdom will help the cause. Nevertheless, Soule and the others successfully free 2 prisoners, an act that earns the conspirators the nickname the Immortal 10. Stories of Soule's boldness spread, and his legend grows among fellow abolitionists. After his father's death, Silas follows the tide of fortune seekers west to the Colorado Territory. Along the trail he befriends famous poet Walt Whitman, who later writes of Soule's courage. In Colorado he works briefly in the goldfields before enlisting in the 1st Colorado Volunteer Regiment when the Civil War begins. At the decisive Battle of Glorieta Pass in 1862 he remains calm under fire, leading his company against Confederate forces and earning a promotion to captain for his bravery. By 1864 tensions rise as settlers encroach on Cheyenne and Arapaho homelands. Major Ned Wynkoop and Captain Soule believe violence is avoidable. They meet tribal leaders including Chief Black Kettle and Little Raven, under white flags at Smoky Hill and later at Camp Weld, promising that if the tribes move near Fort Lyon they will be under U.S. protection. Soule shares meals with the chiefs, shakes hands and writes of their hospitality. For a moment, peace seems possible. Unfortunately, Colonel John Chivington, a former Methodist preacher and fervent Indian hater, has other plans. Believing that a hard strike will earn him political glory, he privately orders the 3rd Colorado Cavalry to prepare an attack. In a dimly lit officer's tent, Soule listens in horror as Chivington announces his intention to kill and scalp all, big and little. Soule protests that the tribes are under the Army's protection and unarmed, but he is overruled. The captain knows his refusal could lead to court-martial or worse. At dawn on November 29, 1864, Soule leads his company toward Sand Creek. Black Kettle's camp is flying both a white truce flag and an American flag that Wynkoop had given him. Chivington orders a full assault. Soule shouts to his men, "I'll shoot any man who fires a shot." He stations his troops as a barrier, protecting fleeing families. While other soldiers mutilate bodies and collect scalps, Soule rescues survivors including Charlie Bent, a half-Cheyenne boy. He witnesses unspeakable horror, children's brains bashed out, elders shot down and mothers begging for mercy. Back at Fort Lyon, Soule writes a letter to Major Wynkoop, pouring out his grief. He estimates that between 150 and 200 people were killed, mostly women and children. It was hard to see little children on their knees having their brains beat out by men professing to be civilized, he confides. The letter contradicts Chivington's triumphant report and exposes the massacre. It is a dangerous act. Chivington vows to keep an eye on Soule, calling him an Indian lover. But Soule's conscience will not allow silence. In January 1865, the U.S. Army convenes an inquiry into the massacre. Captain Soule bravely testifies under oath, describing how the Cheyenne and Arapaho waved white flags and were slaughtered. His detailed account directly contradicts Chivington's claims of a victorious battle. Newspapers across the country published parts of his testimony, shocking the nation. Politicians use his words to argue for treaty reforms and a change in Indian policy. It seems as though justice might prevail. On April 1, 1865, a small wedding ceremony brings a rare moment of joy. Silas marries Hersa Coberly, a young woman who admired his moral courage. They plan to build a life together in the bustling frontier town of Denver. Just 3 weeks later, on April 23, 1865, as Silas patrols a dark alleyway in his role as provost marshal, 2 men ambush him and fire shots at point-blank range. He collapses in the street. Witnesses identify the gunmen as former soldiers loyal to Chivington. Despite being arrested, the killers escape and no one is ever convicted of his murder. In the decades after his death, Silas Soule's name nearly vanishes from mainstream history. Yet the Cheyenne and Arapaho never forget. Each November, runners retrace the path from Sand Creek to Denver in a healing run that honors Soule alongside the victims. A marker now stands on Larimer Street where he was killed, and historians have begun to recognize him as a rare voice of conscience in a dark chapter of American history. His story reminds us that individual bravery can challenge injustice, even when the cost is life itself. As you finish this video, consider sharing Silas Soule's story so that more people know the name of the captain who said no.